Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this big guy right here. This is the Kizer Critical. This is a knife that I saw at Blade Show sort of from afar, and was very interested in because I love a Wharncliffe blade. It's a very bold design, and so I asked Kizer, who provided this in the name of full disclosure, for review, to send one along so I could take a look. And so here it is, and let's go ahead and take it apart. It looks like there's a bunch of T10 involved here, which, if that's true, is great. No, that may be T9, which is also fine, but a little bit weird. Don't mind that, just a Batman mask falling over. There we go. Yep. Bunch of T9. Oh, free spinning. Yeah, that's free spinning. All right, free spinning T9. Let's pop this in here. There we go. Okay, so that's popped out. We'll do the next one here. This is why it's always handy to have multiple versions of Torx driver, and also why I like this little multi-Torx kit thing, because it works very nicely with the sort of grab with the hand thing. Okay, that goes there and that goes there. Now we'll pop out the pivot using, is this T10? That might be T10. Should be weird if they went from T9 to T10 in one knife. Yeah, that's T10. All right. Well, on the bright side, there's no thread locker here, or at least if there is, it's of a kind that's very easily removed. It looks like they might have used a tad of it, but it's mostly fine. So, no problem there. Let's pop this guy open. And indeed, it's open. What we can see here is that, well, it's a Kizer. Whoa, that's a little interesting. Check this out. It's got a big old internal stop pin. Well, I'm sorry, it's a regular-sized internal stop pin on a big old blade, which is weird. I don't actually have any reason to object to it, I guess. I mean, it's a little strange that you've got this much of a pocket open on the blade itself. I mean, maybe you could get something in there, like a spider or something. That's a weird example. I don't very often have issues with knife spiders, guys, but, you know, there's always that paranoia, right? Yeah, it's a ridiculous day, rest assured. So, anyways, but that's slightly interesting. But for the most part, this is another Kizer. You know, Kizer, I think, you know, probably for reasons of efficiency, tends to build their knives very similarly to one another. You know, especially this line of, you know, titanium frame locky things. Every Kizer titanium frame lock looks markedly like every other Kizer titanium frame lock. A couple of differences here. This has pivot collars on both sides, which is neat. No objection there. And actually, and I'm throwing backspaces, whatever. And it nicely serves to set off their little flower-shaped sort of pivot. And I gotta say, on this bigger size, I actually don't mind that flowery pivot thing quite so much as I usually do. It's not the greatest design ever, but at least in my personal aesthetic opinion. But, you know, it seems to work okay. This knife is not lubricated really well at all. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to do a little good for the action, although the action on it is not bad as it stands. We see here that we have a bunch of ceramic washers, which is good. We have a ceramic detent ball, which is also very good. You know, detent ball wear is something that, it's not one of those, oh my God, this is the crucial issue of our times sorts of issues. Very seldom is anything related to knife detent balls a crucial issue of our times. But it is absolutely something that I like to see. So that's good. There we go. That's good. Beautiful. There we are. So, we can go ahead and pop this guy back in. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to clean the bearings, of course. So, to do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of booze. This is 91% rubbing alcohol. If you're ever curious about the tools I'm using to do a disassembly, I have a video on knife disassembly tools. Check it out. It includes, you know, a description of each, why I use it, as well as a link to buy everything that I use on a regular basis. One-stop shopping. If you want to support the channel, you can buy it elsewhere if you don't, but, you know, whatever. But anyways, that's 91% booze, and I think we're good to go here. Go ahead and put this guy back together. Oh, what the heck, I'll clean this little bit of oil off. Okay. So these screws are actually going in. These are little barrels that the screws are going into on both sides from the looks of it, rather than Chicago screws, but hey, whatever. All good. Okay, back at the ranch. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together using a 10-weight nano oil. I'm using it in this little pen dispenser because that makes it a little easier for me to add just a little bit of it. But that said, the pen is not crucial. It is just a nicety. And I'll go ahead and put some on the pivot there as well. You can see here that this pivot has a D shape on one side, and indeed this side of the scales has a corresponding D shape at the tip. So I know that the pivot needs to go in this direction. Pardon me. Come on. There we go. Pop that down there. Beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and set a bearing down onto this. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just use my my pen here. And I'm not actually applying oil. I'm just kind of rotating the bearings a little bit to get what oil is in there onto the full circle of them. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit to the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit to the tent ball track. You can see there's this kind of groove that's been, well, it's not really a groove, but it's just a that and a wear. But this is where the tent ball is sliding on the knife, and when you lubricate that area, the action tends to smooth out a little bit, so that's nice. So that's popped in there. Next thing is repeating the feet on the other side. Go ahead, oil, oil, oil. Drop this onto here. And then pivot collar is in on both sides. Yes, good. I need to put a backspacer back in here. Interesting. So, because this backspacer is just a chunk of titanium, it looks like you could very easily, like, round this off, like, remove this corner or something like that. If you have access to, like, a bench grinder or something like that, or even just kind of cut it off here. That would leave these sharp corners in the back here, but, you know, that, well, how does the blade fit in there? The blade would be a little close if you did that, but, yeah. Either way, we'll, you'll hear why I'm talking about that a little bit later on, but it's something to keep in mind. Would be pretty easy to work on. Okay, put a little bit of oil on the washers on this side, no problem. I think I rotated. Now I need to make sure that the pivot itself is in the proper position for that D shape to be facing back towards the backspacer, which is where the D shape is there. You can often, if you're struggling, use the top scale as almost a wrench. But yeah. Then I press the lock bar down there, which helps everything to seat a little bit better. Since I have the bigger screw in the bigger tip in the driver right now, I'm going to go ahead and put the pivot screw back in there. I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite. I'm using it in a stick lately because that's just very nice and easy to apply. Go ahead and drop this back in there. I'm just going to do it, you know, finger tight. Well, it's always going to be finger tight, but I'm not really trying to crank it down particularly right now because, wow, that's smoother already. Because I haven't yet put the backspacer screws in there. And applying a whole bunch of torque to one end of the knife without doing it to the other side, before the other side is, you know, stabilized, can often, you can get centering issues in knives that are, if the tolerances aren't just right. So there we go, that's in there. Now just checking, didn't leave out any bearings or anything. Not that I would ever do that. Nope, not me, never. Certainly not live in front of like 50 people. Nope. Never. Here we go. That in there. Okay, now next step is tighten the pivot the rest of the way down. See what the action's... Oh, yeah. Okay, that said, the centering is now slightly off. So, and it is off towards the lock side. So I'm wondering if I loosen this up just a little bit. Yeah. So actually here, I'll see if I can demonstrate this. Watch the centering. As I'm tightening this screw here, I'll do it this way. You can see the blade is moving back and forth. So if your blade is not centered and it's towards the show side, the side without the lock on it, very often that means that you need to tighten the pivot a little bit. If it's not centered and it's towards the lock side, usually that means your pivot's a little too tight. So what I've just done there, okay, that is actually slightly blade play-ish. Pivot's a little too loose. So I'm going to tighten the pivot until I don't have blade play anymore. No play. Slightly off center. So what this means is that I'm going to want to take these guys out real quick, or at least loosen them a little bit, and then hope that that relieves some of the internal tensions here. Very often people recommend, if you're having centering issues, learned this trick on the Hinderer forums way back when, tightening everything up. Here, I'll unscrew this as well. Tightening everything up with the blade at a 90-degree position. Because this means, helps if I use the right screwdriver. Come on, there we go. Because this generally means that, there we go. There is very little net force, like the lock bar isn't really exerting much force here. So hopefully this will put everything in kind of a neutral position so that when I tighten everything down, we are good to go. Check the blade play. No play. I'm going to back this pivot off very slightly. See if that helps. Action got a little nicer. There's still no blade play. The centering is now not perfect, but it's good. Can I back it off a little further? Yes, I can. The centering is still very slightly off. See that? It's not quite perfect. Big old blade on this guy. Okay, now I backed it off too much, and we have blade play. So it looks like we're gonna have to. Sorry, I'm just trying to sight down this blade here. It looks like we're gonna have to live with the fact that this is slightly off center. Not ideal, but if that's the amount that it's slightly off center, not freaking out. This could also be the case of a slightly warped blade or asymmetrical grind. I'm not quite sure, but I almost wonder about that. Because the tip of it looks a little bit more centered than the backside. So I'm wondering if maybe there's some difference there going on. But hey, whatever. If that's the worst of the centering issue, then we're doing okay. So, anyways, that is the Kizer Critical here. And although I was doing a very critical disassembly here, I hope it was still interesting to you. But mostly, I hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.